Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! You might notice today I'm wearing my bump cap. Life is tough, buy a helmet. Okay, so today we're going to talk about national divorce. Don't. You can kind of divide this video into three parts. Part one, we're going to talk about definitions. Part two, we're going to compare a national divorce to an actual divorce between a husband and a wife. And then in the final section, we'll talk about what a national divorce might look like, how it would work, and what the world, or what our nation, might look like post-divorce. So let's make the definitions very clear here. A national divorce would be a separation of the United States in two or more parts without conflict, without war, and through legal means. Now, that is very different than a revolution, which is where a group rises up and takes over the national government by force and enforces its will upon the rest of the country through totalitarianism. It's very different than a civil war where there's actual physical conflict and the winner takes all. Civil wars rarely end in what we would consider a divorce. They end in one side winning and the other side losing, one side becoming dominant and the other side becoming an underclass. We see this in the United States' original Civil War, where the North wins, subjugates the South, and Reconstruction makes the South pay the price for their rebellion. So we're going to not look at Civil War. We're not going to look at a revolution, but we're going to look at the peaceful, potentially peaceful separation of the United States into two or more parts. Now, let's get into comparing this to an actual divorce. A lot of people are using the term national divorce, and they never really relate it to what an actual divorce is like and what that might look like. Now, once upon a time, divorce was either not legal at all, depending on the state, or legal only under certain circumstances. Divorce, in my lifetime, originally was very much socially unacceptable. Divorced people were separated from society and seen as untrustworthy, and it was shunned. And in my lifetime, it's become more a natural thing. I think any of you listening are either divorced, or your parents are divorced, or you have divorce in your family. A sibling, for instance, has gone through one or more divorces. So we should all be pretty familiar with the concept of divorce. Now, the thing about a divorce of a marriage, typically it's between a man and a woman. And so you have two very different individuals with different ways of dealing with divorce and different tactics. And to compare a national divorce to that, you kind of have to divide the two factions, the two primary factions, one could say red and blue states, and or Republican and Democrat, right wing, left wing, however you want to make that division. To make the comparison, we kind of got to make one the woman and one the man, right? Now, gender aside, one could argue that there is a masculine and a feminine in every relationship, and they're not always divided by gender. You can have some relationships where the man is more or less a female in ways of thinking, and you can have the reverse where a woman is more male dominant in the way she handles things. I'll give you an example. I know a friend who was a school teacher, and she was married to the principal. And she found out that the principal was having an affair with one of the student teachers, one of the very young student teachers in the school. And she could have handled this in the feminine way. But my friend is very more masculine in thinking, in behavior, in lifestyle, and she handled it more like a man. What she did was hire a private investigator to get pictures, to get proof, and then she walks right in to the office where they both work and tells him to go get the other woman and bring her down there because we're going to have this out right here in the office. She's accompanied by the private investigator, and she has an envelope filled with pictures. At this point, she basically strong arms him into signing the papers. Now, this is a very masculine way, traditionally, of handling a divorce situation. Very straightforward, very aggressive. But that's not typically feminine. And so, what does a divorce kind of look like when you're dealing with a man and woman who are dissolving their marriage? And how do they handle it differently? Now, like I said, there's exceptions to the rule, but we got to kind of come up with a rule. I'm assigning, for purposes of this argument, the left to the left side of the brain, to the feminine side. That there is a logical, mechanical, strategic right side of our brain, and a more emotional, artistic, and fluid left side of our brain. And this is kind of the division in the country, is almost masculine and feminine. The majority of women in this country are Democrats. The majority of men in this country are Republicans. So we are very much divided in this way already. The left tends to be more emotional. They tend to be less logical. They tend to shift the arguments on an emotional basis and disregard logic. The right tends to be more logical, more strategic, and, well, to quote the right, your feelings don't matter. Okay? So in this scenario, we're looking at the red states being more masculine and the blue states being more feminine, and their way of fighting and their way of divorcing is going to reflect that in this scenario. Once again, it's a coffee talk. It's for stuff I don't necessarily believe, but I find interesting. You got to divide it somehow. This is how we're doing it. So I think anyone who brings up national divorce over civil war wants an amicable divorce. But here's the thing about amicable divorces. They almost never occur in situations where there's a large amount of joint property. Amicable divorces tend to occur when both parties have very little, or what they have is clearly defined as theirs and separate property. For instance, my second divorce, we had not been married that long when we got divorced. We didn't own any property together. We didn't have any kids together. Her stuff was her stuff and my stuff was my stuff. And we were able to just part company. It was completely amicable. There wasn't any even lawyers involved. I filed. She signed the papers. We met at she didn't even show up at the courthouse to get the final papers. And no lawyers were involved. Now, my first divorce was bloody and brutal and much more akin to a civil war than any kind of amicable divorce, right? And it's because we jointly owned property, we've been married for a very long time, and we had children, minor children. Those divorces are never amicable. They are very seldom ever amicable. They are always a bloody conflict. Now, before divorce laws, if you wanted rid of your spouse, your main alternative was to just whack them, right? That spousal murder was the way of dissolving marriages in the old days when you didn't have the divorce system in place. So there is that potential for any kind of attempt at an amicable divorce in our nation between the red states and the blue states to suddenly turn into an attempt at destroying the other side and ending it that way. So I don't think there's any chance of an amicable legal divorce between the two sides of our country that doesn't involve bloodshed, that doesn't involve civil war. So I'm really talking about something that I think is impossible, but let's keep going down the rabbit hole. How does a man initiate a divorce versus how does a woman initiate a divorce? This might give you some insight to how a national divorce or a civil war even might kick off in America. Well, the first thing that happens is they become isolated from each other. Their friends become separated. The first division of property typically is the division of friends. You have friends that are on her side, and he has friends that are on his side. And they become very polarized against each other. And you see a division in the friends. In my first divorce, I wanted an amicable divorce. She wanted to win at all costs. And typically, the person who wants the amicable divorce is the person who will eventually get the short end of the stick, unless they can rally later on and embrace the conflict. But as long as they think they're going for an amicable divorce, they're being set up for an ambush. Okay? And that's regardless of gender. If the woman thinks that they can work it out, wants to stay together, wants an amicable divorce, the man will strategize behind her back and execute an ambush against her, which puts her immediately at the disadvantage. This could also work the other way. If a man wants to work it out, if a man wants an amicable divorce, if a man wants to remain friends, and the woman wants to win at all cost, then she's going to strategize behind his back and execute an ambush against him at some point. But those ambushes look very different because of the way the male mind works and the female mind works. And I'm putting forth in this theory that the way that the left might execute an ambush if the right's trying to work it out or have an amicable divorce is going to be very different than if the shoe's on the other foot. If the right is the one who wants to have a divorce, wants to execute it, wants to make it happen, and wants to win at any cost, then those two ambushes look very differently. Let me give you an example, as I did earlier with my female friend who broke the stereotypes, right, and did something very male. My sister was married to a man who was very shady. They'd been married for many years. They had joint property that they owned together, and they had children. She didn't see it coming. She basically caught him in an affair. When she called it out on him, he had a preset up ambush waiting for her. Caught her completely off guard, and she ended up leaving the relationship with nothing. And it's because it was a surprise attack. Yes, she was upset about the affair. Yes, she was angry. Yes, she probably wanted a divorce, at least on the surface, right? But he, on the other hand, had been planning this for a very long time. Long before he ever had the affair, he had already started setting things up in his favor. And what my sister was faced with when she confronted him about the divorce was him calling her into his lawyer's office, putting a set of documents down that had been written up months before he was found out, and he essentially told her, sign that or you'll lose everything. Sign it. And I'll take it a step further. He was a gangster type person, so there in front of his lawyer he said, you will sign these papers, you will take your children and your suitcase and get the heck out of my house, and you'll get out of the state of Oregon by sundown tomorrow, or you'll be buried here by noon the next day. So he threatened to kill her, right? And forced her to walk away. And this would have been less effective had she in any way been prepared for it. So this is an example of a masculine setup. I've known many men who knew that divorce was inevitable, who wanted a divorce, who never let on to their wives. I know of one instance where a man pretended that he wanted to work things out. He took his wife on a getaway, and then a few weeks later, after everything seemed like it was perfect and she was very happy that there had been a change in a new direction, he bought her a spa package with an overnight getaway by herself so she could have a little me time. And he sent her away, and she gladly packed her bags and went. While she was gone on this retreat that he set up, he came in with a U-Haul and removed every piece of furniture and every item in the house. He left nothing behind except her very most personal things, her clothes. And then he already had set up a sale of the property, and he executed this sale of the property. No, I take that back. He terminated the lease of the property is what he did, and turned the keys back over to the property management agency. I got to get my story straight here. And this is not someone I knew. This was an account I read on the internet of a person who did this. And At any rate, when she comes back from this, she's completely caught by surprise, right? He almost won in a single fell swoop. There was nothing she could do about it, right? He relinquished the lease. The house was empty. The property management people were already coming in to paint, and he had set this all up ahead of time, and she was completely unaware of it, right? Now, that's how a masculine strategic male mind might work. That might be something that the right wing might pull off, okay? Now, how does a woman, a very feminine woman with the left brain thinking, execute a divorce? She, like the man, also sees divorce as a inevitability, and so she will secretly start creating another life for herself. This will potentially involve a boyfriend. He may not be the man of her dreams. He's just the transitional boyfriend. Another place to stay. She will secretly, behind the back of the man, slowly start to turn everyone against him in the preceding months leading up to the divorce. She'll sell believable lies. She'll expose things that were supposed to be secret between the two of them. And her intention is to turn everyone in their circle onto her side and demonize him and make him a pariah. Make him so he has nowhere to turn. Potentially even turn his own best friend against him. And they'll do this secretly. They'll also start stashing money. They'll start secretly siphoning off money and creating an alternate economic stability for themselves. They may also get a job if they're a stay-at-home mom, or they might get a promotion, or angle for a promotion, or time it so it happens at a time where they're experiencing an economic boom for themselves individually. So a man in this situation would just feel the estrangement. They would just feel their friend slipping away, but typically they would not put two and two together. Typically they don't put two and two together. And then the woman would initiate some kind of throwdown, some kind of confrontation, some kind of fight. They would engineer a fight, even bait the man and prepare to bait the man so that they can get him to do something violent, right? Do something crazy, right? Sound crazy, say something crazy, get it on recording, get it on tape, get evidence, right? Bait him into some kind of confrontation that might even end up with him arrested. Anything to discredit him, right? And that's the way they would set this up, okay? This is a typical story. Many of you have experienced or heard it yourself. I wanted an amicable divorce in my first divorce. I thought, hey, we're just going to work this out together. I don't know why I thought we could work it out. If we couldn't work out life, how could we work out the separation, right? And so, but, Pollyanna that I am, I thought we could work this out. And I was completely unaware of what was really going on. And she had, we had separated, and she had invited me over under the roof that there was something going on emotionally with the kids that I needed to address. When I got there, it was an ambush. She took me in the other room, and she started a fight, right? And I was almost about to take the bait when I realized that my wife's not a very good actress, right? And she was saying stuff like, "Are you saying then that you want to hurt us and the children?" And I said, "No, what are you talking about? Why are you even saying that?" "So what you're saying is that that we should be in fear of our lives." And I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And then it dawns on me, I'm being recorded. Turns out she had a recorder inside of her purse. I got possession of that thing and played it back and found out that she had been recording me for weeks, right? What had happened is when she decided there was going to be a divorce, she went to her family. This is called triangulation. We can expect this to happen in a national divorce. So how might this go down in a national divorce when you compare it to the plethora of ugliness that goes on in an actual divorce between spouses? Well, you could expect the left to do kind of what they're doing. They're demonizing the right. They're projecting them as white supremacists. They're taking everything that they say and do and trying to put a criminal edge to it. January 6th is a prime example. The step that they want to take, the trap they want to set for the right, is they want us to get so frustrated with them that we do something stupid, a la January 16th, or January 6th rather, that we do something that they can then turn into, look, they're fascists, look, they're white supremacists, look, they're revolutionaries, look, they're criminals. And they want to turn the system against us. They want to turn public opinion against us. You can see the left, I'm clearly on the right here obviously, but you can see the left even going about the act of triangulation, just like they would turn friends against their husband, just like they would try to turn family members against their husband, and then they would go to their strongest ally and involve them in helping them execute the final steps of the ambush. And so we might see this in the way that the left is so closely befriended and in tune with, say, Canada. Canada might side on the left. That would be the left's desire, is to draw Canada in to protect them as they bring about and execute this divorce with their intention to leave us with nothing, right? To go ahead and let the divorce happen, but leave us with nothing. And so how might the right execute that from that masculine perspective? You might see a secret revolutionary group arise, kind of like a secret society, right? A group of powerful people on the right who set everything up ahead of time and ambush the left with a sudden chess-like move out of nowhere that would be very secretive. They wouldn't be concerned so much with public opinion, but would be more concerned with the execution of law and sewing up the win in one fell swoop. So it's clear that a national divorce is probably unlikely to succeed, that it's very easy and probably certain that this would turn into warfare. And it has to do with the division of property. The fight in a divorce really isn't about he said, she said, but it's about I deserve more than they do. That this part of our life should be mine, and he or she should not have that part of their life, of this life, this joint life together. The division of property, the control of the raising of the children, battle for custody. It's the division that always breaks down into brutality. This is where we would run into a problem in a national divorce. Who gets custody of the U.S. military? Who gets custody of the federal bureaucracy? Who gets custody of world trade? Who gets custody of the embassies? That the division of property, it's not a matter of red and blue states dividing. It's a matter of what happens to the federal government, the joint property of both sides. That this is where the fight would turn into a physical one. And this is proven in the secession of the Confederate States in 1861. See, there was an amicable divorce. There was one side that said we want out, and they just left, right? They moved out. The Confederates moved out. But there were there were union establishments, union bases, union property within the Confederacy that the Confederacy set out to claim. When they went to take control of Fort Sumter, this is what caused the actual shooting war to break out. So who gets to control Fort Sill in Oklahoma? The Oklahomans or the leftist union? If we were just to move out and go, you take the federal government and put it where the sun don't shine. Well, we couldn't really allow Fort Sill to stay here in Oklahoma under Union control. We really couldn't allow Fort Hood down in Texas to stay in federal control. So there would be a war break out over Army bases, Navy bases, Air Force bases, national parks, right? National monuments. A lot of people want to focus on things like, could states pull out of the Union and survive financially? I think most states, 90% of them probably could. The vast majority could pull out because they're collecting taxes for the federal government and sending it to this beast to feed it. They could just stop feeding the beast and feed their own government. Now, the problem with a national divorce is, would we just adopt the Constitution if, let's say, the red states pulled out? Let's say we did find a way to split the toys down the middle. You get to keep your bases in your area, and we get to keep our bases in our area. You get to keep your nukes, and we get to keep our nukes. Let's say we find some way to do that without a Fort Sumter type of escalation into a fighting war. Then the question would come, is your state going to be rebirthed into something that you would consider American-like? Okay? And that comes down to the Constitution. Would Texas just adopt the Constitution as it sits? Or would they, more than likely, write a new Texas Constitution? Which would each state's Constitution just simply be defederalized and become the law of the land? Would states like California, if they were to pull out from federal control? See, another concept is just a separation of states. I think that's probably much more doable than the division of 50-50 like you see in a divorce. But the dissolvement of the union might be a possibility where each state becomes its own nation. Each state is divided apart from the federal government. They get to keep the toys in their state, and they would develop their own international treaties, their own state-to-state treaties, their own trade agreements, their own military agreements, and that's probably more doable. But then you could have places like California where there's no longer any freedom of speech. There's no longer any Second Amendment. But you could see situations in Texas where there's no longer any Fourth Amendment. Right-wing conservatives really wish they could come and look under your bed. I always say that both sides are tyrannical. The left wants to look in your gun cabinet, and the right wants to look in your nightstand. Right? They want to look in your underwear drawer. And so you could see places where certain basic rights of privacy no longer exist in a right-wing state. You could see the First Amendment being whittled down on the left side so that you have to speak in this politically correct code. You could see total banning of private firearm ownership in some states, and totally unbridled Second Amendment open right for everyone, and I mean everyone, to possess a firearm. But you could see the Fifth Amendment eroded and taken away in a state like Texas or Oklahoma, where totalitarian right-wing police type people wish they could just beat the confession out of you and make you talk, right? Well, the Fifth Amendment protects us from that kind of thing. You know, our founding fathers were brilliant, and they built something that has stood for more than 2 centuries. And it's been, for the most part, successful and highly functional. Now we've reached a position of tribalism where our own ideas about society have grown so far apart that we have reached a point of irreconcilable differences. How do we preserve the American spirit and still divide? Would this not break down into almost county by county sets of rules, where when you cross one county line, it's legal here and illegal there? And so there's a lot to discuss. I feel like the opportunity for an amicable divorce nationwide is slim to none. I don't believe the division of property will be 100% nonviolent. I don't think you can divide the property of the United States, the federal government, and all of its attributes, especially the military, in a way that would make both sides feel comfortable and fair. And I think inevitably it either goes one of 2 ways. Either it turns into a civil war with armies fighting against armies for control of the entire nation, or it involves a total breakdown of the federal government and a division into literally county by county having its own constitution and its own laws and rules, which could create mayhem beyond the scope of this video. Do you think we were baited on January 6th? Doesn't that look like a woman with a recorder in her purse going, You mean you really want to overthrow the government? Is that what you're saying? Right? And they stepped right into the trap. Is that how they're going to bring about the separation? Is to engineer an emotional, visceral response in the right that they can then demonize, criminalize, and use the existing set of laws and judges to then go after that side and create a subclass? That's what they're trying to do. They almost did it on January 6th. Will there be an overnight takeover by the right wing? Would the right wing set up in secret an ambush, show up with the proof and the paper and the muscle and the weapons and say, this is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, it's war. And we are set up to execute the war in a way that you are not. An overnight takeover. I think that's probably how they would execute a national divorce. I don't think it's going to be amicable. I don't think we're going to sit down around a big round table and just divide up this country without some kind of subterfuge, without some kind of chaos, without some kind of violence and death. We can no longer live together. That is plainly clear. I think that one masculine method for ending a relationship might be the best thing for the right, okay, for the masculine minded, the right brain, is what I did in my last breakup. I just disappeared. I had everything set up. I gave away everything, and I walked away with the clothes on my back and chose freedom over the fight. And I gave up the fight before it happened, and I just disappeared. I just went away. I just stopped participating. This might be a way for one side or the other to take that approach. What if Texas just stopped participating? And what if Texas just let the feds keep operating out of Fort Hood? They went, I don't care. Do what you want. You own that property. You can keep it, right? Oh, you want, just take control of the things that directly affect the people of your state without regard to the national discussion. That peaceful separation usually happens when one person just walks away and they just refuse to fight and they just give up the ghost and they give away everything and they start over from scratch. Texas and Oklahoma and these other red states could do this. We could do it together or we could do it separately. But if you want to divide the federal government up, you're going to see the violence break out. Just like in the war between the states at the Battle of Fort Sumter, where they tried to evict the Union troops from the establishment there. The only way you're going to get an amicable divorce, I believe, when you have joint property, is when one person just doesn't care about the property and they just give it up for their freedom. That's one way we might avoid bloodshed. Will anybody do that? Probably not. We'll fight over everything from foreign embassies to national parks to federal installations. There will be fighting over Washington, D.C. States will divide because half the state is red and half the state is blue. We've talked about that. And we'll probably all fall into chaos. But if one side just wants to walk away, give the federal government and all of its possessions right on over to the other side and just take what we have right now and walk away and start from scratch. Well, that's not acceptable to most people, and you'll see it in the comment section. You'll see people that are like, we don't even want to give up the beaches in California. Why should we give up our access to those beaches? We might want to go sit on a California beach. We can't let them have the West Coast. We can't let them have New York City. You'll see that. It's probably there. I've seen it before anyway when I brought this up. So whether you'll get the people who can make those kind of powerful decisions to just walk away and let it go is highly unlikely. I think conflict is imminent And I don't think any amount of marriage counseling is going to save this republic from a division between the right and the left. Tell me what you think in the comments section. Who knows, we might just go on coexisting and hating each other for the next couple of 100 years, but I see it as highly unlikely. But you tell me. Put it in the comments section. Tell me what you think. I want to remind you that this channel exists because of donations from people like you. If you do not donate to this channel, if you do not support this channel financially through Cash App and PayPal and Patreon and the P.O. Box, if you don't contribute, this channel goes away because I don't get paid by anyone except by you directly. So please recognize that that is the way we do things here. And if I don't survive financially and keep the lights on in the old cabin in the woods, then this channel kind of goes away or falls into disrepair. So hoping and praying for your support and your interaction in the comments, and send me an email. It's all down there. And we'll see you next time on Kwame Talk.